The Montana sunset painted the parking lot of Miller's gas station in shades of amber and crimson, casting long shadows across the weathered asphalt. Morgan Foster stood beside her white Ford F-150, the nozzle of the fuel pump clicking as it finished filling her tank. At 40, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that seemed at odds with her slender frame. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, revealing high cheekbones and eyes that held both warmth and something else. Something vigilant, even when she smiled. Three black SUVs rolled into the station, their engines rumbling with barely contained aggression. They parked in a deliberate formation, one blocking the exit, two flanking Morgan's truck. Military precision disguised as coincidence. Morgan noticed. She always noticed. Six men emerged from the vehicles, moving with the coordinated efficiency of a pack. Their leader, tall, with a close-cropped beard and a scar pulling at his left eye, approached with practiced casualness. His jacket hung slightly off-center, concealing the bulge of a holstered weapon. A Glock 19, Morgan assessed automatically. Extended magazine, judging by the weight distribution. "Nice truck," the man said, tapping her driver's side door with his boot. "Local?" Morgan replaced the fuel nozzle, her movements unhurried. "Just passing through." A lie delivered with perfect conviction. The man's smile never reached his eyes. "Funny. I could have sworn I'd seen you around." He kicked the door harder this time, metal reverberating. "Don't like being lied to, ma'am." Two of his men had circled behind her now, cutting off retreat. The third checked for witnesses. There were none. The station attendant had mysteriously disappeared. The fourth and fifth stood guard by their vehicles. Morgan sighed, a sound of resignation that had nothing to do with surrender. "Last chance to reconsider your approach," she said quietly. The leader laughed, nodding to his men. The one on her right lunged forward, reaching for her arm. What happened next occurred with such fluid precision that it seemed choreographed. Morgan's hand caught his wrist, twisted, and redirected his momentum downward. His face met the truck's hood with a dull thud. The second man rushed her, only to find himself airborne, then crumpling against the concrete. The leader's hand moved toward his concealed weapon, but froze halfway. Morgan stood perfectly balanced, ready. In the rapid movement, the sleeve of her jacket had ridden up, revealing a small tattoo on her inner wrist. A design resembling an ancient compass, rose merged with what might have been military coordinates. Black ink professionally done with one distinctive feature, a tiny red star at its center. Recognition dawned in the leader's eyes, followed by something rarely seen there: fear. "That's not possible," he whispered, backing away. "You're dead. All of you are dead." Morgan pulled her sleeve down, deliberately covering the mark. "Evidently not." The men retreated to their vehicles, dragging their unconscious comrades. The SUVs peeled out of the station, leaving behind only the acrid smell of burned rubber and a question hanging in the air: who was Morgan Foster? 24 hours earlier, the Montana sky stretched endless and blue over Pinewood, a weathered roadside town that had stood sentinel on Route 66 for nearly 9 decades. It was early May, and the last patches of snow had finally surrendered to spring's persistence. In the distance, the jagged peaks of the Absaroka Range caught the afternoon sun, painting the horizon with strokes of golden shadow. Ruby's Diner sat at the heart of Pinewood, its neon sign a beacon to travelers since 1978. Inside Time had stopped somewhere between Elvis Presley and Buddy Holly, whose voices regularly filled the air from the vintage Wurlitzer jukebox in the corner. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, chrome-edged tables gleamed under pendant lights, and the black and white checkered floor had been mopped to a shine that morning, as it was every morning. Morgan Foster wiped her hands on her apron and stepped behind the counter, sliding on the thin black gloves she always wore while cooking an oddity in a roadside diner, but one the locals had long since accepted as just another of Morgan's quirks, like how she always sat facing the door, or how she could catch a falling glass before it seemed to have begun its descent, or the way she sometimes gazed at the highway with eyes that seemed to be looking at something much farther away. "Order up," she called, sliding a plate of perfectly cooked steak and eggs across the counter to Earl Peterson, who'd been coming in for the same breakfast every morning for 12 years. "Thanks, Morgan." Earl nodded, cutting into his steak. At 82, he was Pinewood's unofficial historian, having witnessed the town's slow evolution from lumber outpost to interstate way station. "You hear about those strangers asking questions over at the Bluebird Motel?" Morgan's hand paused imperceptibly over the coffee pot. To anyone else, the movement would have been invisible, but across the diner, a pair of experienced eyes caught it. Colonel Jack Reeves sat in his usual booth by the window, his weathered hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee. At 68, he moved with the stiffness of old football injuries and 3 decades of jumping out of airplanes for Uncle Sam. His silver hair was still cut to regulation length, his posture ramrod straight even when relaxed. The colonel ran the Pinewood gas and service station at the edge of town, but everyone knew his real job was keeping an eye on things, a habit formed during 30 years with special forces that he couldn't quite shake in retirement. Just passing through, probably, Morgan replied to Earl, her tone neutral. Tourist season's starting early this year. The bell above the door chimed as Morgan's daughter entered. Haley Foster moved with her mother's grace, but none of her reserve. At 18, she filled the space with energy that seemed to chase away his shadows. Born with her mother's dark hair, but eyes that sparkled with a joy Morgan's rarely showed, Haley navigated between tables with the ease of someone who'd grown up in this space. Mom, I'm heading to Ellie's after school to work on our history project, she announced, grabbing a muffin from behind the counter. Morgan nodded, her eyes automatically scanning the diner. 8 patrons, all locals, 2 exits, clear sight lines to the highway. The mental inventory was as involuntary as breathing. Be home by 9, she replied, not a suggestion. Colonel Reeves watched the interaction with quiet assessment. He'd known Morgan and Haley since they'd arrived in Pinewood 5 years ago. The official story, a messy divorce in Seattle, a fresh start in Montana, had satisfied most folks in town. But Jack Reeves wasn't most folks. He recognized the hypervigilance, the strategic positioning, the economical movements that wasted nothing. He recognized them because they mirrored his own. The bell chimed again as Sheriff Marcus Dawson entered, removing his hat with a weather-worn hand. At 62, he carried the authority of his badge with the quiet confidence of a man who'd earned respect rather than demanded it. Morning, Morgan, he said, settling onto his usual stool at the counter. The usual, please. Morgan poured his coffee black, sliding it across with practiced precision. Saw some unfamiliar vehicles heading into town this morning. Dawson mentioned casually, though his eyes held a question. Black SUVs, government plates removed, but you can always tell by the wear patterns on the bumpers. Morgan's expression never changed, but beneath the counter, her free hand curled into a fist. Probably just tourists, she said, her tone neutral. May brings them in for the fishing. Dawson hummed noncommittally. Maybe so, though these fellas didn't strike me as the fly fishing type. A silent stretch between them filled with unspoken understanding. Since Morgan had arrived in Pinewood, she and Dawson had maintained a careful, respectful distance around certain topics. He never asked about the scar that peeked from beneath her glove when she reached high for supplies. She never inquired about the photograph he kept in his wallet, the one with the corner torn off as if removing someone from the frame. Been hearing things on the radio, Dawson continued, voice lowered. That outfit they call the Black Wolves moving north from Wyoming, taking over small businesses, creating distribution networks, they call it. Morgan nodded, her expression unchanged as she wiped down the counter. But beneath it, her left hand had tightened into a fist. Mayor's worried, Dawson added. She's calling a town meeting tomorrow night. I'll be there, Morgan said, turning to check on a sizzling order. Figured you would. Dawson sipped his coffee, then added, Haley going to be around tomorrow night. The question seemed casual, but Morgan caught the real meaning. Was Haley going to be somewhere safe? She's staying with Ellie Hansen, school project. Morgan's eyes met Dawson's. I asked them to finish it at Ellie's place. Dawson nodded satisfaction, crossing his weathered features. Good. That's good. As the sheriff finished his coffee, Morgan's gaze drifted to the window where Colonel Reeves sat watching the highway, his posture alert despite his relaxed demeanor. Their eyes met briefly in the reflection of the glass, a silent communication between two people who recognized in each other a shared past, though neither had ever acknowledged it aloud. The afternoon rush had wound down by the time the 3 black SUVs rolled into Ruby's parking lot. Their headlights swept across the diner's interior like searchlights, illuminating the few remaining customers. Old Earl finishing his pie, the Henderson couple in the corner booth, and Colonel Reeves still at his window seat, now nursing a second cup of coffee. Morgan's hand moved to her right hip, an old reflex seeking a weapon that wasn't there. Not in plain sight anyway. The bell above the door chimed as 3 men entered. all in their 30s, all carrying themselves with the unmistakable posture of military training gone wrong. Their confidence wasn't earned through protection of others, but through intimidation. Their eyes moved around the diner with predatory assessment, cataloging threats, exits, and potential leverage. The tallest one with a close-cropped beard and a scar that pulled at his left eye led the way. His gaze swept across the room before settling on Morgan. There was no recognition there. Not yet, but there was calculation. "Evening, folks," he said, his voice carrying a forced joviality that felt like sandpaper on skin. "Hope we're not too late for dinner. Smells mighty fine in here." Morgan wiped her hands on a towel, her expression pleasantly neutral. "Kitchen's open till 9. Take any table you like." As the men settled into a corner booth with clear sight lines to both the entrance and the kitchen, Morgan felt Colonel Reeves's eyes on her, a silent question. She gave him an almost imperceptible shake of her head. Not yet. Whatever storm was brewing, it hadn't broken. And Morgan Foster had learned long ago that sometimes the best defense was to let your enemy believe they had the upper hand. The men ate like soldiers efficiently without waste, constantly aware of their surroundings. They ordered steak and potatoes paid in cash and left a tip that was exactly 15%. Not generous, not insulting, calculated to avoid drawing attention. But it was the questions they asked that set Morgan's internal alarms blaring. "Fine place you got here," the leader said as Morgan refilled their coffee. His name patch partially visible beneath his jacket read Keller. "Been in business long." 28 years, Morgan answered smoothly, "though I've only owned it for 5. "Is that so?" Keller's eyes narrowed slightly. "What brought you to Pinewood? Not exactly a bustling metropolis." Morgan's smile remained fixed as she poured the coffee. "Clean air, good schools, lower cost of living than Seattle." "Seattle," he repeated, testing the word. "Long way from here." That was the idea. A flicker of something amusement perhaps crossed Keller's face. Running from something. The question hung in the air, a deliberate provocation wrapped in casual curiosity. At the counter, Sheriff Dawson set down his fork, his posture shifting subtly. Morgan's laugh was light practiced. "Just a messy divorce. Nothing more dramatic than that." Keller nodded, but his eyes said he didn't believe him. The shorter man beside him, stocky with calloused hands and a neck tattoo partially hidden by his collar, leaned forward. "Got any employment opportunities around here? My associates and I are looking to put down roots. Town this size, not much hiring happens, I imagine." "Most businesses are family-owned," Morgan replied. "Family." Keller repeated, his gaze sliding toward the kitchen where Haley was visible, stacking clean plates. "That's your daughter?" Something cold slithered down Morgan's spine, a sensation she hadn't felt since Damascus. Her expression never changed, but beneath the counter, her free hand curled around the handle of a drawer that contained more than just cutlery. "Yes," she said simply, offering nothing more. Keller smiled, showing too many teeth. "She looks like you. Same eyes." Morgan held his gaze for 3 seconds, not challenging, not submissive, but clear in its message. "Observe all you want. Comment on my daughter again and things change." Sheriff Dawson chose that moment to stand adjusting his belt with deliberate attention to his holstered weapon. "Morgan, I'll take that pie to go if you don't mind. Got to finish some paperwork before the town meeting tomorrow." His emphasis on town meeting was subtle but clear, a reminder that Pinewood stood together, that its residents looked out for one another. Keller's eyes flicked to the sheriff, taking in the badge, the gun, the easy authority. His smile dimmed several watts. "Town meeting? What's the occasion? Planning the summer festival?" "Something like that." Dawson lied smoothly. "You boys planning to be around that long?" The third man, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was soft-cultured, at odds with his muscular build and vigilant eyes. "We go where opportunity takes us, Sheriff, and we've heard there might be some real estate opportunities in these parts." Morgan set Dawson's box pie on the counter with measured control, though her mind was racing. Real estate. They were already talking about territory. "Property values are pretty stable here," Dawson replied. "Folks tend to hold on to what they have." "Everything has a price," the soft-spoken man said, his tone making the statement sound like both a philosophy and a threat. As the conversation unfolded, Morgan was already calculating. The men were advanced scouts, that much was obvious. They were here to assess Pinewood's defenses, identify pressure points, find leverage. Standard infiltration tactics. The bell above the door chimed again, and two more men entered, clearly part of the same group, though they made a show of not acknowledging Keller's table. They took seats at the counter, ordered coffee, and began a loud conversation about fishing prospects in the area. Divide and conquer. Create multiple points of engagement. Basic strategy. Morgan moved between tables with practiced ease, maintaining her role as the unassuming diner owner, while mentally mapping every movement, every glance exchanged between the newcomers. 5 men total, all armed small-caliber handguns from the way their jackets hung. At least one knife carried by the silent one at Keller's table. Professional but not elite. Not yet. As she passed behind Dawson, she murmured, "Advance team." He nodded almost imperceptibly. Figured as much. The evening stretched on the tension in the diner, masked by the routine sounds of dishes and quiet conversation. By 8:30, most of the regular customers had departed, leaving only Keller's group, Sheriff Dawson, Colonel Reeves, and old Earl Peterson, who was nursing his final cup of coffee with stubborn determination to finish the newspaper crossword. Haley emerged from the kitchen, her backpack slung over one shoulder, the signal that she'd completed the closing tasks. Morgan met her daughter's eyes and nodded toward the back door. "Take my truck," she said, tossing Haley the keys. "I'll get a ride with Marcus when we close up." It was their contingency plan established years ago. If Morgan ever sent Haley home alone in the truck, it meant trouble was brewing. The girl was to drive straight home, pack the emergency bag kept in the hall closet, and wait by the landline. If it rang once, hung up, then rang again immediately, she was to take the truck and drive to Helena, to the storage unit registered under a name that wasn't Foster. Haley caught the keys, her expression showing that she understood the subtext. "You sure, Mom, I can wait?" "Go on," Morgan said, her tone gentle but firm. "Finish that history paper. I won't be late." As Haley headed for the back door, Keller's gaze followed her with uncomfortable intensity. Morgan watched him, watching her daughter, and something shifted in her eyes. A momentary glimpse behind the mask she wore. A flash of the person she had been before Pinewood, before Morgan Foster. Keller must have caught it because his posture changed subtly. A slight straightening, a new alertness. For a moment, predator recognized predator across the linoleum expanse. Then Morgan blinked, and she was just a diner owner again, collecting empty plates with a practiced smile. "Can I get you gentlemen anything else?" she asked, her voice steady. "We'll be closing up soon." Keller leaned back, studying her with new interest. "Actually, we were hoping to discuss a business proposition with you, Miss Foster." Morgan raised an eyebrow, waiting. "My associates and I represent a development group," Keller continued, the lie rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. "We're looking to invest in small businesses along this corridor. Your diner occupies a prime location." "It's not for sale," Morgan replied, simply turning to wipe down the adjacent table. The soft-spoken man chuckled. "We haven't even mentioned a price yet." "Doesn't matter what the price is," Morgan said, her back still turned to them. "Ruby's isn't for sale." Keller exchanged glances with his companions, then stood, reaching into his jacket to produce a business card. He placed it on the table and slid it toward Morgan. "Think about it," he said. "Small towns like this are changing. Economic pressures, supply chain issues, security concerns. A smart businesswoman plans ahead." Morgan turned, looked at the card, but didn't pick it up. "Is that a concern or a warning, Mr. Keller?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just an observation. The world's an unpredictable place. Folks need protection these days." And there it was, the threat wrapped in the language of concern, the protection racket as old as civilization itself. Sheriff Dawson stood, then his chair scraping against the floor with deliberate loudness. "Gentlemen, I believe the lady said she's not interested, and we're about to close up for the night." Keller's eyes never left Morgan's. "Of course, Sheriff. We wouldn't want to overstay our welcome." He reached into his pocket and extracted a $50 bill, placing it beside his plate. "For the excellent service." As the men filed out, Keller paused at the door. "We'll be around for a few days in case you reconsider." After they left, silence hung in the diner like smoke. Earl Peterson folded his newspaper, left his usual tip, and departed with a concerned glance between Morgan and Dawson. Colonel Reeves remained in his booth, silent but alert. When the door closed behind Earl, Dawson moved to the windows and drew the blinds. "Black wolves," he confirmed, turning to Morgan. "Just like the report said. They started in Wyoming, working their way north. Small towns, vulnerable businesses. They move in, take over legitimate operations, use them for distribution, drugs, weapons, whatever's profitable. Morgan was already moving, flipping the sign to closed and locking the front door. They had military training. She observed, her voice dropping its practiced softness, becoming clipped analytical. Not special forces, but not just grunts either. Dawson watched her with narrowed eyes. How can you tell? She didn't answer the question. Instead, she asked one of her own. How many men do you have on your force, Marcus? 3 deputies, 2 part-time. He ran a hand over his face. We're not equipped for this kind of threat. Morgan nodded, moving methodically around the diner, checking locks, closing blinds. Her movements had changed, no longer those of a diner owner, but something more efficient, more purposeful. They'll be back tomorrow, she said, with more men. They're establishing a presence first, mapping out the town's defenses. The town meeting will accelerate their timeline. They won't want you organizing resistance. Dawson stared at her. You sound like you've dealt with this before. Morgan paused, then reached for the business card Keller had left. She examined it, plain white with only a name and phone number. No company, no address. Not with the Black Wolves specifically, she said carefully, but with operations like theirs. They identify isolated communities, move in with overwhelming force, establish control through intimidation and strategic violence. Usually they target the most respected business first. Make an example. And that would be Ruby's, Dawson concluded. You've become something of an institution here, Morgan. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Wasn't my intention. She pocketed the card and moved toward the kitchen. You should go, Marcus. Check on your deputies. Make sure they're prepared. Dawson didn't move. And what will you be doing? Morgan stopped, then turned to face him fully. For the first time since he'd known her, she made no effort to soften her gaze or hunch her shoulders to appear smaller. She stood straight, her eyes clear and cold as Montana mountain water. What I've been trained to do, she said simply. Dawson studied her for a long moment. When you came to Pinewood 5 years ago, I ran your background check myself. Morgan Foster, divorced, previously employed as an administrative assistant at Boeing. No criminal record, no military service. Nothing remarkable. He paused, then added, that background was very thorough. Too thorough. Like someone had gone to a lot of trouble to make it bulletproof. Morgan said nothing, but she didn't look away. I didn't push, Dawson continued. Figured everyone deserves a fresh start, and you've been good for this town. Good for Haley. He hesitated. But I always wondered what you were running from, or who, outside the sound of engines, roared to life as the SUVs pulled away from the diner. Not running from, Morgan corrected quietly. Running toward a different life. Dawson nodded slowly. And now, he asked. Morgan's expression hardened. Now I need to make a phone call. Only then did Colonel Reeves speak, rising from his booth with the fluid grace of a man half his age. I believe that's my cue. Morgan and Dawson turned to him, surprise evident on the sheriff's face. Morgan's expression was more complex: recognition, wariness, and something that might have been relief. How long have you known Jack? She asked. The colonel's weathered face creased into a grim smile. Since the day you arrived and picked the house with the best defensive sightlines in town without blinking at the price. He approached moving with the measured confidence of a man accustomed to command. Folks like us, we can change our names, change our stories, but we can't change how we move, how we see the world, how we prepare. Dawson looked between them, understanding dawning. You two know each other. Not directly, Reeves answered, but I know the tattoo on her wrist. Saw it when she was reaching for the high shelf last summer. Phantom Unit, the most elite ghost soldiers our military ever fielded. Officially, they never existed. Morgan's hand moved unconsciously to her wrist, where the compass rose with its red star remained hidden beneath her glove. You've been watching me, she said, not an accusation, merely an observation. Protecting you, Reeves corrected. Pinewood isn't just any town, Morgan. It's a sanctuary. Has been since '91, when a few of us decided we needed a place where operators could disappear when necessary. A community for those who served in the shadows. Morgan's eyes widened slightly. That's why there are so many. Former military in town, exactly. Reeves nodded. Jenkins at the General Store Force Recon. Dr. Mitchell at the clinic, former field surgeon with Delta. Even Earl, he was signals intelligence back in the Cold War. He turned to Dawson. The sheriff here was military police before he put on that badge. Dawson nodded confirmation. Wasn't part of any special outfit, but I know how to keep secrets. Morgan absorbed this, her tactical mind reassessing Pinewood with this new information. Not just a random small town, but a carefully constructed haven. A fortress disguised as a community. The Black Wolves have no idea what they're walking into, she said. No, Reeves agreed, but they will, unless we stop them first. He glanced at his watch. Your daughter should be at Jenkins' cabin by now. He'll have activated the emergency protocols as soon as she arrived. Morgan's eyebrow rose. You've been monitoring my emergency protocols. Integrating them, Reeves corrected, but your safe house network, our operator community, they complement each other. He reached into his pocket and extracted a satellite phone, military-grade secure communication. I believe you had a call to make. But first, I think it's time you told us exactly who's hunting you and why the Black Wolves being in Pinewood is more than just a territorial expansion. Morgan took a deep breath, decision made. Not who's hunting mine, who I've been hunting for 5 years. She removed her glove, revealing the tattoo fully for the first time since arriving in Pinewood. And his name isn't Keller, it's Nathan Crane, the man who massacred my unit in Damascus and orphaned my daughter. Haley Foster drove her mother's truck down the familiar road toward home, her mind racing faster than the speedometer. Mom's signal had been clear. Trouble was coming. The emergency protocols were activated. The truck's headlights cut through the deepening twilight, illuminating the winding road that led to their modest house on the outskirts of Pinewood. Unlike the other homes scattered along the road, the Foster residence stood slightly apart, positioned on a gentle rise that offered clear sight lines in all directions, with few trees to obstruct the view. A coincidence, according to her mother, a tactical choice, according to Haley's suspicions. At 18, Haley was no longer the frightened 13-year-old who had arrived in Pinewood with a woman who claimed to be a distant relative. 5 years had passed since Morgan Foster had appeared at the Foster home in Seattle, presenting paperwork that couldn't be questioned with a determination that wouldn't be denied. 5 years since she'd looked into Haley's eyes and said, I knew your parents, I made them a promise. If you'll let me, I'd like to keep it. 5 years of building a life of learning to trust again, of watching her new mother scan restaurant exits and check the locks 3 times each night, of shooting lessons for wilderness safety and self-defense training, because every young woman should know how to protect herself, of understanding without being told that Morgan Foster was not who she claimed to be. As Haley pulled into the gravel driveway, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The front door, which Morgan always left locked, stood slightly ajar. She put the truck in reverse, immediately backing out just as her mother had taught her, never approach a compromised location. Create distance, assess from safety. Once back on the main road, Haley pulled over and reached under her seat, retrieving the prepaid phone that Morgan insisted she carry at all times. She dialed the only number programmed into it, Pinewood General Store. A gruff voice answered, Old Man Jenkins, who ran the local store and served as Pinewood's unofficial second line of defense after the sheriff's department. Mockingbird, Haley said, the code word feeling strange on her tongue after all this time. This is Sparrow. There was a beat of silence. Location. Home is compromised. I'm on Ridge Road heading east. Acknowledged. Proceed to checkpoint Bravo. Await further instructions. The line went dead. Haley took a deep breath, put the truck in drive, and headed toward checkpoint Bravo, the fishing cabin by Elkhorn Creek that Jenkins maintained for special occasions. And then as she drove, her mind replayed the scene at the diner, the men with their too sharp eyes, the way her mother's posture had changed when they looked at her, the silent communication with Sheriff Dawson. Haley wasn't supposed to notice these things. She was supposed to be the normal teenager, focused on graduation and college applications. But living with Morgan had taught her to see what others missed, to recognize threats before they fully materialized. And the men at the diner were definitely threats. She took the turnoff to Elkhorn Creek, navigating the rough dirt road with practiced ease. The truck's headlights caught the small cabin nestled among the pines, dark, seemingly abandoned. But Haley knew better. As she parked and killed the engine, the cabin door opened. Jenkins stood silhouetted in the doorway, his ever-present shotgun cradled in his arms. Your mother call, he asked as Haley approached. She shook her head. Use the protocol. Home was compromised when I got there. Jenkins cursed under his breath. Wolves moving faster than we expected. Come on in, girl. Perimeter secure. Inside the one-room cabin was Spartan but functional, a wood stove in the corner, a small kitchenette, two cots with military-grade sleeping bags, a ham radio on a wooden table and weapons, a rifle rack on the wall, a locked cabinet beneath it. Your go-bag in the truck, Jenkins asked, peering out the window at the darkness. Haley nodded. Should I get it? I will. You stay put. As Jenkins retrieved her emergency backpack, Haley's gaze was drawn to a map of pinewood pinned to the wall. Red pins marked various locations throughout the town and surrounding areas. She recognized some of the diner, their house, the sheriff's office, the school. Others were unfamiliar, random spots in the forest along the highway near the old quarry. What are these? She asked when Jenkins returned. He set her backpack on one of the cots, then glanced at the map. Observation points, rally locations, your mother's work. Haley stared at the map, then at Jenkins. How long have you known about her? The old man's weathered face creased into something between a smile and a grimace. Known what? That your mother isn't just a diner owner since the day she arrived and bought the best defensible property in town without batting an eye at the price. He moved to the wood stove, adding another log to the fire. Folks like her, they can change their names, change their stories, but they can't change how they move, how they see the world, how they prepare. What was she? Haley asked the question she'd held back for 5 years, finally slipping out. Jenkins considered her for a long moment. Not my story to tell, girl, but I will say this, there are soldiers and then there are warriors. Your mother is the latter. The ham radio crackled to life, interrupting any further questions. Jenkins moved to it, adjusting knobs with practiced fingers. Checkpoint Bravo receiving, he said into the microphone. Sparrow secure, a voice asked. Morgan's voice, though stripped of its usual warmth. Affirmative, Jenkins replied. Home compromised. I know. Perimeter sensors triggered 20 minutes ago. At least 3 intruders. Sweep and search pattern. Haley felt a chill run down her spine. Her mother had sensors around their house. Of course she did. Escalation timeline, Jenkins asked. Accelerated. They made their play at the diner tonight. Town meeting tomorrow will force their hand. Jenkins rubbed his jaw. How many we looking at? Initial estimate 20 to 25. Likely more arriving overnight. Former military, well-armed, organized. Against our 3 deputies and volunteer sheriff, Jenkins muttered. Not good odds. There was a pause on the radio, then Morgan's voice again. I've activated Protocol 7. Jenkins' eyebrows shot up. You sure about that? Once that bell's rung, can't be unrung. Expect first arrival by dawn, full assembly by midday. Understood. Jenkins glanced at Haley, then back at the radio. Sparrow status. Maintain Bravo position until I arrive. I'm securing the diner, then implementing blackout measures downtown. ETA 3 hours. Copy that. Bravo standing by. The radio went silent. Jenkins sat back in his chair, his expression troubled. What's Protocol 7? Haley asked into the silence. The old man sighed. Your mother calling in reinforcements. From where, who? Jenkins met her gaze steadily. People like her, people who owe her, or who she owes. He paused. Dangerous people, girl. The kind you pray you never need, but thank God they exist when you do. Outside, the wind had picked up, rustling through the pines with a sound like whispered warnings. Haley moved to the window, looking out at the darkness that seemed to press against the glass. Will they come? She asked quietly. These people. Jenkins checked his shotgun with methodical precision. If your mother called, they'll come. He chambered around with practiced efficiency. Question is whether they'll get here in time. Haley turned back to the old man, a sudden realization crystallizing in her mind. You were like them once, like my mother. Jenkins' hands stilled on the shotgun. For a moment, he looked past Haley, seeing something distant and terrible. Different branch, he said finally. Different war, same purpose. He met her eyes. Your mother was Phantom 6, the best of the best. Ghost operatives who went where others couldn't, did what others wouldn't. Phantom 6, Haley repeated the name, unfamiliar yet somehow fitting, like the missing piece of a puzzle she'd been working on for years. What does that mean? Jenkins resumed checking his weapon. Precise hostility acquisition and neutralization tactics of multiple objectives. The six was for the original six operators who formed the unit. Deep cover, deep infiltration, the kind of outfit that officially never existed. Haley absorbed this thinking of her quiet, efficient mother who made the best apple pie in 3 counties and never missed a parent-teacher conference. Who could field strip a hunting rifle blindfolded just for fun. Who practiced martial arts in the basement at 5 a.m. thinking Haley was still asleep. Why did she leave? She asked. What happened? Jenkins secured the shotgun's breech with a decisive click. Damascus, he said simply. 2015. Mission went sideways. Bad intelligence. Betrayal from within. Most of the unit was wiped out. He paused, his expression darkening. Your mother was the only operator who made it out alive, and she brought you with her. Haley's breath caught. Me, I was in Damascus. Jenkins looked at her sharply. You don't remember. She shook her head, confusion clouding her features. I was in Seattle, in foster care. My parents died in a car accident when I was 12. The old man's face softened with something like pity. Is that what she told you? Before Haley could respond, headlights swept across the cabin windows as a vehicle approached. Jenkins was on his feet instantly, shotgun raised. Get behind the table, he ordered, all conversation forgotten. Haley complied, her heart hammering against her ribs as Jenkins positioned himself beside the door. The vehicle stopped. An engine died. Footsteps crunched on gravel. 3 sharp knocks on the door followed by 2 soft ones. Jenkins relaxed slightly. Identify, he called. Phantom Rising, a man's voice answered. Deep, confident, unfamiliar. Jenkins lowered his shotgun and opened the door. The man who entered was tall and broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked dark hair cropped close to his scalp. Despite being in his mid-60s, he moved with the fluid grace of someone half his age. His eyes sharp and assessing swept the cabin before settling on Haley. You must be the Sparrow, he said, his voice carrying a faint accent she couldn't place. Thomas Mitchell. Friends call me Doc. Another vehicle pulled up outside, its headlights cutting through the night. Doc glanced over his shoulder. And that would be Viper, he said, a hint of a smile touching his weathered features. Always right on time. Haley looked between Doc and Jenkins, questions burning on her tongue. But before she could voice any of them, Doc fixed her with a penetrating stare. We've got about 15 minutes before your mother arrives, he said. And there are some things you need to know before she gets here. Morgan Foster moved through the darkened diner with practiced silence, her footsteps making no sound on the worn linoleum. After Sheriff Dawson had departed to secure the town, she had begun her preparations, systematic, thorough, leaving nothing to chance. First, she disabled the security cameras with a small electromagnetic pulse device retrieved from beneath the counter. Then she moved to the office at the back of the diner, kneeling before the ancient safe that had come with the building. The combination was a simple birth date, not hers, not Haley's, but that of Ruby Henderson, the diner's original owner. A believable choice for a small-town business. But when Morgan entered the combination and opened the safe, she ignored the cash box and business documents inside. Instead, her fingers found the hidden latch beneath the safe's upper panel. With practiced precision, she pressed it 3 times in rapid succession, then twice slowly. The false bottom of the safe slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss. Inside lay a compact satellite phone, a thumb drive in a waterproof case, and a small metal box with a digital lock. Morgan retrieved all 3, then reached deeper into the hidden compartment for what lay beneath them, a custom Glock 19, modified with a sound suppressor and laser sight along with 3 extra magazines. She checked the weapon with quick, efficient movements, then secured it in a concealed holster at the small of her back. The satellite phone went into her pocket, the thumb drive around her neck on a chain, and the metal box into a small backpack she'd kept ready in the office. Moving to the window, Morgan scanned the street outside. The Black Wolves' SUVs were gone, but she had no doubt they were still watching, probably from the vacant building across the street, which offered optimal sightlines to the diner's entrance. She allowed herself a grim smile. Let them watch. They'd see exactly what she wanted them to see, a concerned business owner securing her property for the night. They wouldn't see what came next. Morgan returned to the main area of the diner and began the familiar closing routine. Wiping tables, stacking chairs, turning off the neon sign. all perfectly normal activities that would register as non-threatening to any observers. Only when she retreated to the kitchen did she break from routine. Moving to the industrial refrigerator, she pulled it away from the wall with surprising strength, revealing a metal panel set into the floor. A keypad awaited her fingerprint, and the panel slid open to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Morgan took one last look around the kitchen, then descended the panel, closing silently above her. The space below was small but efficiently organized, a command center hidden beneath the diner. A desk with 3 monitors, a weapons rack containing an assortment of firearms and tactical gear, a medical station with supplies far beyond basic first aid, and along one wall a corkboard covered with photographs, maps, and handwritten notes. 5 years of intelligence gathering on the Black Wolves and other potential threats. Morgan moved to the central monitor and powered it up. The screen glowed to life, displaying a satellite view of Pinewood, with blinking markers indicating the perimeter sensors she'd placed throughout the town. Several were now flashing red, triggered by movement around her home and along the main approaches to town. They were moving faster than expected. She pulled out the satellite phone and dialed a number from memory. It rang 3 times before connecting. Authentication, a computerized voice prompted. Phantom to Watchtower, Morgan replied. Sierra Echo 792 Delta. A pause, then a different voice. Human male wary. Authentication accepted. Phantom, your protocol has been dormant for 5 years. Reactivation requires authorization. Damascus override. Morgan said the words bitter on her tongue. Phoenix rising. Another pause, longer this time. Override accepted. Sitar green lit. What's your situation? Morgan's voice became clipped, precise. The voice of a commander, not a diner owner. Black Wolves, 20 plus, advancing on Pinewood, Montana. Paramilitary operation. Likely drug distribution network expansion. Civilian population at risk. Request full spectrum support. Understood. Available assets in your vicinity. Doc Viper Echo Delta. ETA varies from 1 hour to 8 hours. Morgan closed her eyes briefly in relief. 4, more than she'd dared hope for. Additional intel, the voice continued. Black Wolf's leadership has changed since your last briefing. Current commander is Nathan Crane, formerly Nathan Keller. CIA asset went rogue in 2016. Specialized in deep cover operations in Middle East theaters. The world seemed to tilt beneath Morgan's feet. Nathan Crane, the name she'd searched for across continents. The ghost who had vanished after Damascus. The traitor who had sold out his own team for money. The man responsible for the deaths of her real husband and everyone else in her unit except herself and Haley. Phantom, do you copy? The voice prompted. Morgan forced herself back to the present. I copy. Proceed with asset deployment. I'll establish containment protocols in Pinewood. Understood. Be advised, Phantom. If Crane is involved, this may be more than a territorial expansion. It may be personal. Acknowledged, Morgan replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Phantom out. She ended the call and placed the satellite phone on the desk, her mind racing. Nathan Crane in Pinewood wasn't a coincidence. Nothing in her world ever was. If he was here leading the Black Wolves toward her town, it meant one of 2 things. Either he'd finally traced her new identity, or he was expanding his criminal enterprise and had no idea who really owned Ruby's Diner. Either way, the result would be the same. Blood would be spilled on Montana soil before this was over. Morgan moved to the weapons rack, selecting a lightweight tactical vest and beginning to assemble her gear with methodical precision. As she worked, her thoughts turned to Haley, the child she'd rescued from the Damascus safe house, the sole survivor of the family that had been caught in the crossfire of a betrayal. The girl who believed she was merely an orphan, that Morgan had adopted, not the living witness amid a massacre that had claimed her biological parents. The memory surfaced unbidden. The safe house in Damascus, the sound of gunfire, the smell of blood and cordite. James and Eliza Carter, CIA analysts, assigned to provide intelligence for the Phantom operation, lying dead in the hallway. Their daughter Haley, 12 years old and terrified, hiding in a ventilation shaft where her father had concealed her when the attack began. The child's eyes, when Morgan had found her, wide with shock, unseeing. The way she'd gone completely silent for weeks afterward. And then gradually, mercifully, the memories had faded, replaced by the story Morgan had constructed with the help of agency psychologists. A car accident in Seattle. Distant relatives. A fresh start, a necessary lie to protect a young mind from trauma too great to bear. And now Crane had found them. Whether by design or cosmic coincidence, the architect of that bloody night and was mere miles away, closing in on the life Morgan had built from the ashes of her former existence. She secured the last strap on her tactical vest and checked her weapons one final time. Then she moved to the corkboard and removed a single photograph, a team picture taken in an undisclosed location showing 6 individuals in desert camouflage. Their faces were partially obscured by tactical gear, but their posture spoke of absolute confidence, of lethal capability held in perfect control. Morgan traced her finger across the image, stopping at a tall figure standing slightly apart from the others. Nathan Crane, before the betrayal, before Damascus. She tucked the photograph into her vest pocket, then ascended the stairs back to the diner's kitchen. After securing the hidden entrance, she moved through the darkened restaurant one last time, checking exits, sight lines, potential cover positions. In her mind, the homey interior was already transforming into a potential battlefield. Tables became barriers. The counter became a defensive position. The large front windows became dangerous points of vulnerability. As she finished her assessment, Morgan caught a glimpse of her reflection in the chrome of the coffee machine. A woman prepared for war, not the diner owner the town knew. For 5 years, she had maintained her cover with perfect discipline, had embraced the role so completely that sometimes in quiet moments, she almost believed it herself, almost. But beneath Morgan Foster had always been Phantom 6, the operative who had survived when others hadn't. The woman who had made a promise to protect a child who had lost everything. The hunter who had never stopped looking for Nathan Crane, even while building a life that seemed a world away from Damascus. She exited through the back door, locking it behind her. The night air was cool against her skin as she moved through the shadows toward the edge of town, avoiding the main street where the Black Wolves would have established observation points. As she walked, Morgan pushed up her sleeve and looked down at the tattoo on her inner wrist, the Phantom Unit insignia that marked her as one of the elite few. The compass rose with its distinctive red star at the center, the mark that had once been a badge of honor, then a painful reminder, and now perhaps a warning to those who would threaten what she had built. A symbol the Army had once relied upon, and later feared when the unit became too effective, too lethal, too autonomous for conventional command structures to control. Morgan covered the tattoo again and continued through the darkness, moving like a ghost toward the rendezvous point where Haley waited toward the coming storm that would either destroy everything she had built or finally bring an end to the nightmare that had begun in Damascus. Either way, Nathan Crane would soon discover that some ghosts never stop hunting. The glow of the wood stove cast dancing shadows across the walls of Jenkins' cabin as Morgan Foster arrived. She entered without knocking, her movements fluid and purposeful, a soldier returning to familiar terrain. Her eyes found Haley first, assessing, confirming safety. The tight line of her shoulders eased slightly, the first crack in her operational persona. Commander Thomas Mitchell Doc, to the members of Phantom 6, stood from his position at the map table, acknowledging Morgan with a nod that carried the weight of their shared history. They had served together for 8 years before Damascus, their bond forged in operations across 4 continents. Diana Viper Rivers leaned against the far wall. Arms crossed, a combat knife visible in an ankle sheath. The reunion of Phantom operators was silent, communicating volumes through posture and presence alone. "Status," Morgan asked, her voice clipped. "Perimeter sensors placed at quarter-mile intervals around the cabin," Jenkins reported. "Motion-activated silent alarm to these receivers." He tapped a small device on his belt. "Town's crawling with Black Wolves. At least 3 teams doing reconnaissance, standard 4-man configuration." Morgan nodded, unsurprised. "Colonel Reeves is mobilizing our local assets. We need to consolidate information." She turned to Doc. "What's your assessment?" The older man rubbed his jaw, the gesture revealing a thin white scar running from his ear to his collar, a souvenir from an extraction gone wrong in Kandahar, when he and Morgan had spent 18 hours pinned down by enemy fire. "From what I've seen, they're using standard insurgent suppression tactics, the same ones we taught the private contractors in Iraq. Identify key infrastructure, isolate leadership, establish dominance through visible presence." His eyes narrowed. "But they're rushing it. Normal timeline for a town this size would be 2 weeks of surveillance before any action. They're compressing to 48 hours. Because of the town meeting, Viper suggested, her voice carrying the faint rasp of someone who'd once inhaled too much smoke. They can't risk organized resistance. There's more to it, Morgan said, her gaze shifting to Haley, then back to her former teammates. Crane is here, not just directing operations, personally present. The atmosphere in the cabin changed instantly, tension crystallizing into something harder, colder. You're certain, Doc asked, though his tone indicated he already believed her. Morgan nodded. Confirmed by Watchtower. He's using the name Keller now, but it's him. Haley watched this exchange with growing confusion and a strange sense of dread. The name Crane meant nothing to her, yet it sent ripples of reaction through these hardened veterans. More importantly, she'd never seen her mother like this, stripped of the careful civilian mannerisms she'd maintained for 5 years, revealing something lethal beneath. Someone needs to tell me what's happening, Haley said firmly, her voice steadier than she felt. All of it. Now. The four adults exchanged glances, a silent negotiation. Finally, Morgan nodded. She deserves the truth, she said, then turned to face her daughter directly. Especially if Crane is here. Morgan pulled up a chair across from Haley, close enough to reach out, but maintaining a respectful distance. For the first time since entering the cabin, her expression softened, though her eyes remained alert, tracking every shadow, every sound. My real name is Captain Morgan Reeves, she began. Before Pinewood, before I became Morgan Foster, I was the commanding officer of a classified military unit codenamed Phantom 6. We specialized in deep cover operations in high-risk environments, missions that officially never happened in places American forces officially never went. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the compass rose tattoo with its red star center. 6 of us each with a specialty, all operating under a single mandate: identify and neutralize emerging threats before they reached American soil. She paused, measuring her words. We were effective, too effective eventually, the kind of unit that makes politicians nervous when wars need to end, but enemies remain. Haley studied the tattoo, a symbol she'd glimpsed only in fragments over the years. And Damascus Jenkins mentioned it. Morgan's jaw tightened. Our final mission, December 2015. Intelligence indicated a new terrorist cell forming in Syria, acquiring chemical weapons capabilities. Our orders were to locate and eliminate the threat, extract key intelligence assets. She took a breath. Those assets were your parents, Adam and Emily Carter, CIA analysts embedded with regional intelligence gathering evidence on weapons smuggling. The world seemed to tilt beneath Haley. My parents. But you said they died in a car accident in Seattle. That was the cover story, Morgan said gently, created to protect you, to give you a chance at a normal life after what happened. What did happen? Haley's voice was barely above a whisper. Morgan looked to Doc, who nodded encouragement. The mission was compromised before it began. Someone sold us out, gave up the safe house location, the extraction plan, everything. When we arrived, the place was already under attack. 4 of our team died in the first 3 minutes. Your father had hidden you in a ventilation shaft when the attackers breached the house. Your mother, Morgan faltered for the first time. Your mother died trying to destroy classified data that would have endangered dozens of other operatives. The cabin fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, a hushed witness to revelations long buried. Nathan Crane was our 6th team member, Morgan continued. He wasn't at the safe house during the attack. Later, we discovered why he'd arranged the whole thing. Sold information to the highest bidder. $30 million in untraceable diamonds. Her voice remained steady, but her hands had formed fists. He was supposed to eliminate all witnesses, but he didn't know about you. I found you after I fought my way inside. You were in shock, barely responsive. Morgan's eyes softened as she looked at Haley. Your father's last words to me were about you. Find her, he said. Keep her safe. I promised him I would. She swallowed hard. So I got you out, called in an emergency extraction, and went dark. The agency wanted to separate us, put you in witness protection, send me back into the field. But I couldn't let that happen. Not after I'd made that promise. So you disappeared, Haley said, realization dawning. With me. Morgan nodded. Became Morgan Foster, single mother from Seattle looking for a fresh start. Colonel Reeves and I had served together briefly during my early years with Special Forces. He helped us settle here, though neither of us acknowledged our connection openly. Until now, Doc added grimly. Until now. Morgan agreed. Haley sat back, absorbing this revelation, the truth of her origins, the identity of the woman who had raised her, the reality that her life in Pinewood had been built on carefully constructed lies. Yet strangely, it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like pieces falling into place, explanations for 100 small oddities that had never quite made sense. That's why you always check the locks, she said. Why you made me learn self-defense. Why we have emergency protocols. Morgan nodded. I thought we were safe here. That Crane believed we both died in Damascus. I was wrong. He might not know, Viper interjected. Black wolves have been working their way through small towns across 3 states. Pinewood could be coincidence. There are no coincidences in our line of work, Doc countered. You taught me that, Morgan. Before Morgan could respond, the radio on the table crackled to life. Checkpoint Bravo, this is Watchman. Come in. Colonel Reeves' voice tense but controlled. Jenkins reached for the transmitter. Watchman, this is Bravo. Go ahead. Black wolves are mobilizing. 3 SUVs just left the motel headed downtown. Looks like they're accelerating the timeline. Tell Phantom I'm initiating Phase 1 containment. Rendezvous at Point Charlie in 30 minutes. Copy that, Jenkins replied. Bravo out. Morgan was already on her feet. We need to move. Jenkins, secure the cabin. Doc Viper with me. Haley. I'm coming with you, Haley interrupted, standing to face her mother. If what you're saying is true, if this Crane person is after me too, I'm not sitting here waiting. Morgan started to object, but something in Haley's expression stopped her, a determination that reminded her too much of Adam Carter. The same stubborn resolve that had made him one of the best analysts in the agency. Stay behind us, she said finally. Do exactly as I say when I say it. No exceptions. Haley nodded a silent promise. Doc retrieved a secure case from beneath one of the cots, opening it to reveal an assortment of weapons and tactical gear. He began distributing equipment with the efficiency of a quartermaster who knew his team's preferences without asking. A customized Beretta M9 with sound suppressor for Morgan, a compact M4 carbine, for himself a pair of combat knives for Viper in addition to her sidearm. Point Charlie is the old fire watchtower overlooking the town, Jenkins explained as they prepared. Perfect vantage point, 3 escape routes, pre-positioned supplies. Colonel established it as our primary observation post 2 years ago. Morgan checked her weapon with practiced movements, the muscle memory undiminished by 5 years of civilian life. Doc, what's your read on the Black Wolves' capabilities? Mixed quality, he responded, loading spare magazines. Their advanced team shows training, probably ex-military, maybe even some agency washouts. But their numbers suggest they're bulking up with mercenaries. Less disciplined, more prone to violence. That tracks with their operations in Wyoming, Viper added. They start with a core team, then recruit locally. Intimidate, some bribe, others eliminate resistance. Morgan nodded the tactical assessment, confirming her own observations. Their standard pattern is to establish a foothold, then expand through legitimate businesses. But Crane's personal involvement changes things. This isn't just about territory for him. It's about completing what he started in Damascus, Doc concluded grimly. Which means we end this tonight, Morgan said, her voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. For the town meeting, before they can consolidate their position. They moved out into the Montana night, a team reunited by circumstances none of them had sought, but all had prepared for. Morgan took Point Viper on their 6th dock beside Haley in the center of their formation. They traveled without lights, navigating by moonlight and memory through the dense pine forest that surrounded Pinewood. As they moved, Haley felt something stirring in her mind. Fragmented images, disconnected sensations. The smell of spices in a marketplace. The sound of prayers echoing from distant minarets. A man's voice, gentle but firm, teaching her a game with pebbles arranged in patterns. A woman's hands, elegant and precise, showing her how to fold paper into birds that seemed ready to take flight. Her parents. Not abstract concepts from a fabricated car accident, but real people with voices and sense and habits she had once known intimately. I remember, she whispered the words, barely audible. Not everything, but pieces. Morgan glanced back, concern evident even in the darkness. The trauma specialist said that might happen. Suppressed memories resurfacing under similar stress conditions. They're not just fleeting images anymore, Haley continued, her voice gaining strength. I remember the safe house, the blue tiles in the kitchen, the courtyard with the lemon tree. She touched her neck fingers, finding the chain she'd worn for as long as she could remember. And this, my father gave it to me. He said it was special, that I should never take it off. Morgan stopped so abruptly that Doc nearly collided with her. She turned, staring at the pendant that gleamed dully in the moonlight. Your father's pendant, she said, recognition dawning. Adam always wore it, said it was a family heirloom. Haley held it up, a simple silver disc with intricate engravings that resembled ancient script. He put it around my neck the night of the attack, said it would keep me safe. Her brow furrowed. There was something else, something about it being more than it seemed. Doc stepped closer, examining the pendant with newfound interest. Carter was CIA Technological Services before he went into analysis, specialized in miniaturized communication and tracking systems. You think it's more than jewelry? Viper asked, her tactical mind immediately grasping the implications. I think Adam Carter was too thorough to leave his daughter unprotected, Morgan replied, even if the worst happened to him. Before they could discuss it further, the radio at Morgan's hip crackled softly. Colonel Reeves' voice came through, pitched low but urgent. Phantom team, be advised. Black Wolves have established checkpoints at all major roads into town. They're conducting house-to-house searches in the East District. Mayor Thompson and Dr. Richards have been taken to the Mountain View Motel. Hostage situation developing. Morgan raised the radio. Copy that, Colonel. Status of Sheriff's Department. Dawson and 2 deputies are pinned down at the station. 3rd deputy is unaccounted for. I've got eyes on the motel from position 2, counting at least 15 tangos heavily armed. Acknowledged. We're proceeding to Point Charlie, ETA 15 minutes. Make it 10, Reeves replied grimly. Situation's deteriorating fast. They increased their pace, moving through the forest with greater urgency. Haley kept up her movements, more assured than Morgan had expected, the result of years of hiking Montana's wilderness combined with the self-defense training Morgan had insisted upon since their arrival in Pinewood. As they approached the ridge that housed the old fire watchtower, Doc raised a closed fist, the universal signal to halt. They froze instantly, melting into the shadows of the pines. A moment later, Haley heard what had alerted him, the low rumble of an engine, the crunch of tires on gravel coming from the access road that led to the tower. Black Wolves, she whispered. Morgan shook her head slightly. They don't know about this location. She exchanged glances with Doc and Viper, a silent communication that resulted in immediate action. Doc and Viper disappeared into the forest, circling to approach from different angles, while Morgan guided Haley to a protected position behind a fallen tree. Stay here, she instructed. If anything happens, head northeast. There's a drainage culvert beneath the old logging road marked with 3 white stones. Emergency cache inside weapons supply satellite phone. Before Haley could protest, Morgan had vanished into the darkness, moving with the ghost-like silence that had earned her unit its name. Alone, Haley settled into the concealment position, controlling her breathing, as she'd been taught in the shooting lessons Morgan had insisted were just for hunting. Minutes passed, marked only by the soft whisper of wind through the pines and the distant calls of night birds. Then suddenly silence, even the insects had ceased their chirping. Haley tensed her hand, moving to the pendant at her throat, drawing comfort from its solid presence. A soft whistle broke the stillness. 3 notes in a distinctive pattern. A moment later, Morgan reappeared, gesturing for Haley to join her. It's Echo, she explained as Haley approached. Our communications specialist. He's with the colonel at the tower. They climbed the remaining distance to find Colonel Jack Reeves and a lean, silver-haired man with angular features waiting outside the base of the fire tower. The newcomer Echo greeted Morgan with a brief nod, his pale blue eyes sharp with intelligence behind wire-rimmed glasses that seemed at odds with his military bearing. Didn't expect a family reunion in the Montana wilderness, he remarked dryly. Good to see you, Shadow. Circumstances could be better, Morgan replied, but there was genuine warmth in her voice. Echo had been her second-in-command in Phantom 6, the tactical genius behind some of their most successful operations. Echo, this is Haley. The older man's gaze softened as it fell on Haley. Adam's daughter. You have his eyes. He extended a hand. Sean Walker. I worked with your father on several projects. Haley shook his hand, finding his grip firm, but not overwhelming. You knew him well. As well as anyone could know a man who kept secrets for a living. Echo replied with a sad smile. He saved my life in Ankara. I never got to return the favor. Colonel Reeves cleared his throat. We should continue this inside, too exposed out here. They entered the watchtower, climbing the metal stairs to the observation room at the top. The space had been transformed from its original purpose into a tactical operations center. Maps covered one wall, surveillance equipment another. A bank of monitors displayed feeds from cameras positioned throughout Pinewood, revealing the Black Wolves' activities in real time. You've been busy, Jack, Morgan observed, taking in the sophisticated setup. The Colonel and Morgan had history that predated Phantom 6. They had served together in Afghanistan in 2002 when Reeves had commanded the Special Forces unit Morgan had been attached to as a young intelligence officer. He'd recognized her potential, then had recommended her for the specialized training that eventually led to Phantom. Now, 2 decades later, their paths had converged again under circumstances neither could have anticipated. Retirement gets boring, the Colonel replied with a grim smile. Been upgrading our surveillance capabilities for the past 3 years. Never thought we'd need them quite so soon. Echo moved to a computer station, fingers flying over the keyboard. I've tapped into their communications network, he reported. Military-grade encryption, but nothing I haven't seen before. They're using rotating frequencies, standard counter-surveillance protocols. Can you jam them? Doc asked. Better. Echo's thin lips curved in a predator's smile. I can feed them false information. Make them see ghosts where there are none. Appropriate, Viper murmured. Colonel Reeves directed their attention to the central map. They've established their command center here at the Mountain View Motel. 3 checkpoints at the main roads. Patrols throughout town concentrating on the business district and residential areas east of Main Street. He indicated red pins marking each position. They're moving with military precision, but their pattern reveals their priorities: control access, isolate leadership, secure high-value targets. The standard playbook, Morgan agreed, studying the deployment. But they're rushing, making mistakes. These patrols are too spread out, communication points too vulnerable. Her finger traced a route through the map. We can exploit these gaps, disrupt their command structure. That's just what they want, came a new voice from the stairwell. They turned to see Jenkins entering, his weathered face grim beneath his cap. Intercepted communication from their forward team, he reported, handing a small device to Echo. Recorded 2 minutes ago. Echo plugged the device into his system, and a voice filled the room, cultured, controlled, chillingly familiar to Morgan. All units be advised. Shadow is active in the area. I repeat, Shadow is active. Implement Damascus protocols immediately. Converge on pre-designated fallback positions. Primary target has shifted. Find the girl. The room fell silent as the recording ended. 5 pairs of eyes turned to Haley, who stood frozen, the implications washing over her like ice water. He knows, she whispered, about me, about you. Morgan's expression hardened into something that would have been unrecognizable to the residents of Pinewood, who knew her only as the quiet diner owner. Damascus protocols, she repeated the words like stones dropping into still water. That confirms it. This isn't about the Black Wolves expanding territory. It's about finishing what he started 5 years ago. The girl, Colonel Reeves echoed. He's specifically targeting Haley. Why, after all this time? Morgan turned to Echo, who was already accessing classified databases through channels that officially didn't exist. Pull everything on Adam Carter's final projects, she instructed, specifically anything related to Damascus intelligence. While Echo worked, Doc moved to Haley's side. May I? He asked, gesturing to the pendant she still clutched. After a moment's hesitation, she removed the chain and handed it to him. The older man examined it carefully, his fingers probing the intricate engravings with the precision of someone accustomed to handling delicate objects under pressure. The design isn't decorative, he observed. These patterns, they're circuit pathways disguised as ornamental script. He glanced up at Morgan. Your father was developing quantum encryption technologies before Damascus. Unbreakable codes embedded in physical objects. A data carrier, Echo said, looking up from his screen. According to Carter's last filed report, he was developing a prototype secure storage device capable of holding terabytes of information in an object the size of a coin. His expression grew troubled. The project was classified Nova 9, beyond top secret, and he gave it to his daughter for safekeeping. Viper concluded, her tactical mind connecting the dots. Insurance in case the worst happened. Haley stared at the pendant in Doc's hands. This familiar object suddenly transformed into something else entirely. "What's on it?" Echo continued, reading his face illuminated by the blue glow of the monitor. Carter was investigating weapons shipments from U.S. contractors to insurgent groups in Syria, tracing financial transactions through shell companies. He looked up, his expression grave. The last entry mentions evidence implicating high-level officials in defense and intelligence. Names are redacted, but the implication is clear. He found something big, something worth killing for. And Crane was the enforcer, Morgan said, pieces falling into place, tasked with eliminating the evidence and anyone who knew about it. Her gaze shifted to Haley. "You're not just a witness to what happened in Damascus. You're carrying the evidence that could bring down everyone involved." The weight of this revelation settled over the room. Haley looked down at her hands, then back at the pendant, her father's final gift, both protection and burden. "How would Crane know about this?" she asked. "After all this time, he might not have known initially," Colonel Reeves suggested, "but someone higher up would have. When the Black Wolves intelligence network identified Morgan in Pinewood, they would have connected the dots." Morgan said slowly, a new possibility forming. "They've known all along, been tracking us, waiting for the right moment." Echo's fingers flew over the keyboard again. "Checking for digital fingerprints in your background records." After a moment, he nodded grimly. "There it is. Your Foster identity was accessed 3 times in the past year from secured terminals at Langley. Someone's been monitoring you." "Which means this isn't just Crane," Doc concluded. "He's working for someone with agency access. The same people your father was investigating," Viper added, looking at Haley. The implications cascaded through Morgan's tactical assessment, reshaping her understanding of their situation. This wasn't just a confrontation with a rogue operative. It was the continuation of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government, a conspiracy that had already proven its willingness to eliminate anyone who threatened its existence. "They won't stop with Pinewood," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of calculations behind her eyes. "If they're activating resources at this level, they'll burn everything to get to Haley and that pendant." "So we give them what they want," Haley said suddenly. All eyes turned to her, expressions ranging from shock to concern. "Not literally," she clarified, standing straighter. "We make them think they're getting what they want. Use me as bait." "Absolutely not," Morgan replied instantly, maternal protection overriding tactical consideration. "It's the logical move," Haley countered, her voice stronger than Morgan had ever heard it. "They're tearing apart the town looking for me. People are in danger, people who've been our neighbors, our friends, for 5 years. We can't just hide while they suffer." "She has a point," Colonel Reeves said quietly. "Crane's men have already taken hostages. They'll escalate until they get what they want." Morgan's expression remained unyielding, but Haley stepped forward, meeting her gaze directly. "You've spent 5 years teaching me to be strong, to be careful, to be prepared," she said. "You didn't do that just so I could hide when things got dangerous. I am Adam and Emily Carter's daughter, and I'm your daughter too. Let me help end this." The cabin fell silent except for the soft, electronic hum of Echo's equipment. Morgan studied Haley's face, the determined set of her jaw, the clear-eyed courage that reminded her so much of both her biological parents. In that moment, Morgan saw not the child she had rescued from Damascus, but the young woman she had helped shape, capable, resolute, unwavering. "We'd need a perfect plan," she said finally. "No margin for error." "Then it's fortunate you have the best tactical team ever fielded by the U.S. military standing in this room," Colonel Reeves observed dryly. Morgan's lips curved in a ghost of a smile. "Echo, what assets do we have available?" The communications specialist consulted his tablet. "In addition to our team here, Delta is 90 minutes out. Local resources include 7 former military personnel in town, plus Sheriff Dawson and his deputies, assuming we can extract them from their current situation. And our emergency cache at the diner," Morgan added. "Weapons, tactical gear, specialized equipment." Colonel Reeves moved to the map, his weathered finger tracing potential approaches. "If we're going to use Haley as bait, we need to control the battlefield. Force Crane to meet us on our terms, not his." "The old lumber mill," Morgan suggested, studying the map. "Isolated, multiple access points, good cover. We know the terrain, they don't." "Too obvious," Viper countered. Has to be somewhere Crane would believe somewhere with significance, Haley's eyes fixed on a point on the map. The diner, she said quietly. Ruby's. It's the center of everything our life here, the town itself. She looked up at Morgan. And it's where you've been hiding in plain sight for 5 years. We're better for a final stand. The tactical assessment passed unspoken between the veterans. Ruby's Diner occupied a central location in town, offered multiple escape routes, and most importantly, contained Morgan's hidden command center and emergency supplies. More than that, it represented everything they had built in Pinewood, the life worth defending. The diner, Morgan agreed finally, but we do this right. Full tactical deployment, multiple layers of security contingency plans for every scenario. She turned to Echo. I need eyes and ears on every Black Wolf's position in town. Complete surveillance coverage. Already on it, he replied, typing commands into his system. Tapping into security cameras, cell networks, radio frequencies. They won't be able to move without us knowing. Doc Viper prep for close quarters engagement. Non-lethal options where possible, but be prepared for maximum resistance. They nodded, already moving to inventory their weapons and equipment. Colonel, coordinate with your local assets. We need diversionary actions at all 3 checkpoints, precisely timed. Consider it done, Reeves replied with the confidence of a man who had commanded special operations for 3 decades. And Jenkins, Morgan continued, I need you to get a message to Sheriff Dawson. Tell him to hold his position and wait for our signal. When this breaks, we'll need legitimate law enforcement to secure the aftermath. And me? Haley asked, standing firm against the storm of preparations swirling around her. Morgan studied her daughter for a long moment, weighing maternal instinct against tactical necessity. You'll be with me, she said finally, but first we need to understand exactly what your father left you. She nodded toward the pendant. If that really is a quantum storage device, we need to know what's on it before we use it as leverage. Echo held out his hand for the pendant. If it's Carter's work, it'll have specific activation protocols. Biometric most likely. May I? Haley nodded, and Echo took the pendant to his workstation. Under the watchful eyes of the team, he connected a series of delicate instruments to his computer, then carefully placed the pendant on a scanner pad. Definitely active, he murmured as readings appeared on his screen, powered by body heat with a standby mode when not in contact with skin. Ingenious. His fingers flew across the keyboard, probing the device's security systems. Triple-layered authentication, physical possession, biometric signature, and he looked up at Haley. Voice activation. It's keyed to recognize specific vocal patterns. My father's? Haley asked. Echo shook his head. Yours. The revelation hung in the air, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Adam Carter had designed the device not just to store information, but to ensure that only his daughter could access it, a final safeguard against the very forces that had hunted them. Do you remember your father ever teaching you a specific phrase? Echo asked. Something he had you repeat, perhaps as a game? Haley closed her eyes, searching fragmented memories that were only now beginning to resurface. He used to have me recite poetry, she said slowly. The same lines over and over. I thought it was just because he loved literature. Can you remember any of it? Morgan asked gently. Haley concentrated, the words emerging from some deep recess of memory. Though much is taken, much abides, she recited. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, we are. Echo's equipment beeped the pendant, glowing faintly on the scanner pad. Tennyson, Doc said softly. Ulysses. A poem about never giving up, never surrendering to age or adversity. Partial activation, Echo reported, watching his screens. The device recognizes the passphrase but needs more. It's a fragment of a longer sequence. Haley's brow furrowed in concentration, chasing the elusive memory. Then slowly she continued, one equal temper of heroic hearts made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. The pendant flashed brightly, then settled into a steady glow. Echo's monitors erupted with streaming data, encrypted files cascading across his screen. Full activation, Bikuma, he confirmed, his voice hushed with professional respect. Carter's encryption is unlocking. We're in. As the team gathered around Echo's workstation, watching as the secrets hidden within the pendant began to reveal themselves, a radio on Colonel Reeves' belt crackled to life. All units, this is Keller, came the smooth, cultured voice that Morgan knew all too well. I know you're listening, Shadow. I know you're out there, and I know what you want. Morgan took the radio from Reeves, her expression hardening into combat readiness. I propose an exchange, Crane continued. Simple, clean. You and the girl for the hostages I've collected. Mayor Thompson, Dr. Richards, and a few others your little town seems to value. Morgan pressed the transmit button. And why would I trust you? Crane Damascus taught me better than that. A pause, then a soft chuckle. So formal, Captain Reeves, after all we've been through together. His voice hardened. You have 1 hour to surrender yourselves at the lumber mill. Come alone, unarmed. For each minute you're late, one hostage dies. For each ally I spot within a mile radius, one hostage dies. Another pause. Oh, and Shadow, I know about the pendant. Bring it too, or don't bother coming at all. The transmission ended, leaving a heavy silence hanging over the operations center. 5 pairs of eyes turned to Morgan, awaiting her response. He's desperate, she observed, her tactical mind already calculating angles, probabilities, contingencies. He wouldn't risk exposing himself like this unless he had no choice. Someone above him is applying pressure, and which means we have leverage, Colonel Reeves noted. We also have a time limit, Doc countered, and civilian lives at stake. Morgan turned to Echo, who was still processing the data from the pendant. What have we got? The communications specialist's expression was grim as he looked up from his screens. Everything. Financial records, communication logs, operational directives, a complete paper trail linking defense contractors, intelligence officials, and foreign assets in a weapons smuggling operation worth billions. He pointed to a name highlighted on his screen, including direct orders to Nathan Crane to eliminate all witnesses in Damascus, signed by the then Deputy Director of Operations. Enough to bring down everyone involved, Viper said quietly. Enough to get us all killed, Jenkins added. Morgan's gaze moved from the data to her daughter, weighing the value of justice against the price of survival. For 5 years, she had lived with the ghosts of Damascus, had carried the burden of being the sole survivor, the only one who knew the truth. Now the truth was within reach, but at what cost? We don't negotiate with terrorists, she said finally, her voice carrying the weight of decision. But we do set traps for them. She turned to Colonel Reeves. Initiate Shadow Protocol, full tactical deployment. We're taking the fight to Crane, but on our terms, not his. The colonel nodded, already reaching for his communications equipment. Shadow Protocol confirmed, he replied, a soldier receiving orders he had long anticipated. All assets green-lit. As the team dispersed to their assigned tasks, Haley pulled Jenkins aside, speaking in low tones. The plan we discussed earlier, she said. Is it still viable? Jenkins studied her for a moment, his expression grave but respectful. Operation Sparrow, yes, but it's even more dangerous now that Crane's specifically targeting you. But it could work, the old soldier nodded slowly. With the right timing and a hell of a lot of luck, yes, but your mother won't like it. That's why we don't tell her, Haley replied, her voice carrying a determination beyond her years. Not until it's too late to stop. Jenkins hesitated, torn between respect for Morgan's authority and recognition of Haley's right to make her own choices. You're sure about this? Haley touched the pendant at her throat, now returned to her after Echo's analysis. My father knew the risks when he gave me this. He trusted me with it. Now I'm trusting you to help me use it the way he intended. After a long moment, Jenkins nodded. Operation Sparrow proceeds as planned. I'll coordinate with the colonel. He'll understand the necessity. Across the room, Morgan watched this exchange with the heightened awareness that had kept her alive through countless hostile situations. Something was happening beyond the parameters she had established, but now wasn't the time to investigate. First, they had to survive the coming confrontation. Morgan turned back to her team, her expression set with grim determination. Let's move. We've got a trap to set. The abandoned lumber mill loomed against the pre-dawn sky like the skeleton of a forgotten giant. Decades of Montana winters had weathered its massive timbers to a silvery gray, while rust had consumed the once gleaming machinery that had transformed ancient forests into the building blocks of America. Nature had begun to reclaim the sprawling, complex pine saplings, pushing through cracked concrete wild grasses, softening the harsh industrial edges. Morning glories climbing the rusted conveyor belts that hung suspended like the rib cage of some prehistoric beast. Colonel Jack Reeves studied the structure through military-grade binoculars from his position on the ridge half a mile east. His weathered hands, steady despite his 68 years, made minute adjustments to the focus as he cataloged defensive positions, fields of fire potential vulnerabilities. They fortified the main processing building, he reported to the small group gathered around him. Two-man teams at each entrance, snipers on the catwalks, motion sensors along the perimeter fence. He lowered the binoculars, his expression grim but determined. Professional setup. They've done this before. Doc Mitchell nodded, unsurprised. The former field surgeon had spent 30 years patching up the consequences of such professionalism. Estimated strength. 20 minimum, the colonel replied, plus Crane and his inner circle, all armed with military-grade weapons, M4 carbines, MP5 submachine guns, what looks like a Barrett 50 cal on the northern tower. Morgan Foster, once again fully Captain Morgan Reeves, commanding officer of Phantom 6, absorbed this information with the cold calculation of a predator assessing prey. She had exchanged her diner owner's clothes for tactical gear, a lightweight ballistic vest over a black compression shirt, cargo pants, with specialized pockets for equipment, combat boots laced with precision. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe braid, her eyes clear and focused despite the sleepless night. The Barrett changes things, she observed, her voice carrying none of the concern the words implied. 3/4 mile effective range. We'll need to adjust our approach vectors. Already recalculated, Echo confirmed, not looking up from the tablet displaying a satellite view of the area. Updated routes are on your tactical displays. His fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, adjusting parameters factoring in the new threat. If they're deploying heavy hardware like that, they're expecting serious resistance. Good, Viper said, checking the edge on one of her custom combat knives. Hate to disappoint them. The small clearing they occupied half a mile from the lumber mill had become their final staging area. Equipment cases lay open on portable tables, weapons arranged with military precision, communications gear humming softly in the background. The 5 former Phantom operators moved through their preparations with the synchronized efficiency of people who had trained together for years, each anticipating the other's needs without discussion. Only Haley seemed out of place in this martial assembly, though she carried herself with a composure that belied her 18 years. She wore a lightweight tactical vest over her closed concession to Morgan's insistence on protection, and watched the veterans with attentive eyes, absorbing their methods, their language, their unwavering focus. Morgan approached her daughter, checking the fit of her vest with professional thoroughness that couldn't quite mask maternal concern. "Remember the plan," she said, adjusting a strap that didn't need adjusting. "You stay with Doc at all times. If something goes wrong, you follow the emergency extraction protocol without hesitation or argument." "I know," Haley replied, her voice steady. "Just like we practiced." Morgan's hands stilled on the vest. "This isn't practice, Haley. These men will kill you without hesitation if they get the chance." "I understand." Haley met her mother's gaze directly. "I've understood since the moment you told me the truth about Damascus, about my parents, about you." She touched the pendant at her throat, the quantum storage device that had made her a target. "This ends today one way or another." Something flickered in Morgan's eyes, pride mingled with a fear she would never voice. She started to speak, then stopped as Colonel Reeves approached. "It's time," he said quietly. Morgan nodded, her expression shifting back to operational focus. "Final checks, everyone." The team gathered in a tight circle for the last briefing before deployment. "Remember," Colonel Reeves said, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who had led others into combat for decades. "They have numbers, but we have experience. Wars aren't won by the side with the most bullets, they're won by the side with the best strategy." He looked each of them in the eye in turn. "Every person in this circle has faced worse odds and walked away. Today will be no different." "Comms check," Echo ordered, activating the secure network that would keep them connected during the operation. One by one, they confirmed their communication systems, each voice clear through the encrypted channel that would be their lifeline in the chaos to come. "Weapons check." Doc added, the former surgeon's hands moving with clinical precision over his equipment. They verified their primary and secondary arms, so confirming ammunition counts, checking sights, ensuring each piece of equipment was ready for the demands they would place upon it. Morgan's custom Beretta M9 with suppressor, Doc's compact M4 carbine, Viper's twin combat knives and sidearm, Echo's specialized electronic warfare gear, the Colonel's Remington 700 sniper rifle, a veteran tool for a veteran soldier. Medical, Morgan prompted. Doc patted his field kit. Full trauma supplies, blood expanders, painkillers, surgical equipment if needed. His expression remained impassive, but they all understood the implications. Field medicine meant preparing for the worst. Contingencies. She continued running through the checklist that had kept them alive through dozens of operations. Primary, secondary, and tertiary extraction routes confirmed, Echo replied. Emergency protocols established with local assets. Sheriff Dawson and his deputies are in position to secure the perimeter once we've neutralized the main threat. The town's veterans, Morgan asked, turning to the colonel. 7 former special operators positioned at strategic locations around the mill, Reeves confirmed. All volunteers, all with combat experience. They understand their roles. Morgan nodded, satisfied with the preparations. There was nothing more to be done now except execute the plan they had crafted through the night, a plan that would either end the threat to their lives or end their lives entirely. One last thing, she said, her voice softening slightly. Whatever happens in there, we're family. All of us. Her gaze lingered on Haley. We go in together, we come out together. The team acknowledged this with solemn nods. In their world, such declarations weren't sentimental, they were sacred oaths. Jenkins, Colonel Reeves said, turning to the older man who had remained silent during the briefing. You're clear on your role. Jenkins nodded, his weathered face set with grim determination. Crystal Colonel, Operation Sparrow proceeds regardless of what happens at the mill. Morgan's eyes narrowed slightly. Operation Sparrow, that wasn't in the briefing. Jenkins and Haley exchanged a glance that didn't escape Morgan's notice. Contingency plan, the colonel explained smoothly. Need-to-know basis. Insurance in case things go sideways. Before Morgan could press for details, Echo's tablet emitted a soft alert. Movement at the mill, he reported, studying the screen. Crane's men are taking positions. Looks like they're expecting us right on schedule. Morgan accepted the change of subject, focus shifting back to the immediate threat. Then let's not disappoint them. She checked her watch, an old mechanical timepiece that had survived 3 war zones in countless covert operations. Synchronized timers, execution in exactly 47 minutes. As they made their final preparations, Haley approached Jenkins, speaking in low tones that wouldn't carry to the others. You're sure this will work? She asked. The old soldier's eyes crinkled at the corners, a ghost of a smile beneath his perpetual vigilance. Plans like this always work, girl, until they don't. That's why we have backups for our backups. And if all the backups fail, Jenkins checked the shotgun he'd carried since his days in Special Forces decades earlier. Then we improvise. First rule of combat, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Haley nodded, touching the pendant at her throat, her father's final gift, now a weapon in its own right. I won't let them down. Any of them. I know you won't, Jenkins replied with quiet confidence. Carter blood runs strong. Across the clearing, Morgan watched this exchange with the heightened awareness that had kept her alive through situations where others had perished. Something was happening beyond the parameters she had established, a subplot within their carefully choreographed operation. In another time with different stakes, she might have intervened, demanded transparency, reasserted control. Instead, she turned back to her equipment check, a subtle acknowledgement that her daughter had earned the right to her own agency in this fight. Whatever Operation Sparrow entailed, Morgan had to trust that it served their shared purpose. After all, she had raised Haley to be resourceful, independent, and above all, a survivor. Just like her. Tano. The abandoned lumber mill had been transformed from industrial relic to military stronghold in the hours since Nathan Crane had chosen it as his command center. Black SUVs formed a perimeter around the main building's tactical gear, and weapons cases were stacked in strategic locations, and men in combat attire moved with practiced efficiency between positions. Generators hummed powering lights and communications equipment. Sentries patrolled the fence line, while snipers on the catwalks maintained overlapping fields of fire that covered every approach. Inside the main processing building, where massive saws had once reduced ancient pines to lumber, Crane had established his headquarters. The cavernous space with its 30-foot ceilings and rusted machinery now housed modern technology, satellite communications, surveillance monitors, weapons racks. The contrast between the weathered industrial past and lethal modern purpose created an atmosphere of dislocated time, as if past and present had collided in this remote Montana outpost. Crane himself stood on the elevated platform that had once housed the mill supervisor's office, overlooking the operation he commanded. At 53, he remained physically imposing, 6 feet of lean muscle maintained through rigorous discipline, his movements economical and precise. The scar beside his left eye had deepened with age, giving his face a permanent asymmetry that accentuated the cold calculation in his gaze. He wore tactical gear like his men, but with subtle differences that marked his status: a custom sidearm and a hand-tooled leather holster, a communications headset more sophisticated than standard issue boots that cost more than most of his subordinates earned in a month. Small luxuries amid function, the hallmarks of a man who had risen from operator to commander, from asset to authority. Status report, he demanded, not looking away from the satellite imagery displayed on the monitor before him. A younger man with the hardened demeanor of someone who had seen combat but not enough of it to understand its true cost consulted a tablet. All positions secured, sir. Hostages contained in the secondary processing building under guard. Perimeter sensors active, drone surveillance operational. And our visitor? No sign yet, but we tracked her vehicle moving east from town 20 minutes ago. She's coming. Crane nodded, unsurprised. Of course she is. Shadow always was predictable in her unpredictability. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Set condition read, I want all teams on high alert. She won't come alone, and she won't come through the front door. Sir, the subordinate acknowledged, moving to relay the orders. Left alone on his elevated perch, Crane allowed himself a moment of reflection. 5 years since Damascus. 5 years of building his empire from the ashes of his former life, transforming from government asset to independent power. The Black Wolves had begun as his personal security detail and grown into a paramilitary force that controlled territory in 3 states with connections that reached into the highest levels of power. All of it potentially threatened by one woman who refused to stay dead and the evidence she protected. His hand moved unconsciously to the scar beside his eye, a parting gift from Morgan Reeves during their final confrontation in Damascus. The last time they had faced each other as equals. Perhaps the last time anyone had faced him as an equal. A commotion at the main entrance drew his attention. 2 of his men entered, half dragging a figure between them, a woman in civilian clothes, her hands secured behind her back, her head covered with a black hood. They brought her to the center of the floor and forced her to her knees. Crane descended from his platform with deliberate steps, the sound echoing through the cavernous space. He approached the captive, nodding to one of the guards who removed the hood. Morgan Reeves looked up at him, her expression revealing nothing beyond mild inconvenience, as if she'd been delayed by traffic rather than captured by armed mercenaries. Nathan, she said, her voice carrying neither fear nor anger. You've aged. Crane studied her with clinical detachment, noting the lack of tactical gear, the absence of visible weapons, the controlled breathing that betrayed no anxiety despite her vulnerable position. And you haven't, he replied. Domesticity suits you, it seems. Small-town diner owner. Surrogate mother. Quite the reinvention for Phantom 6's most lethal operative. We all find our paths. Indeed. Crane circled her, slowly maintaining a careful distance despite her restrained condition. And yours has led you back to me after all this time. Convenient. Nothing convenient about it, Morgan replied, tracking him with her eyes but not turning her head. You brought this reunion to my doorstep, Nathan. My town. My home. Collateral damage, he dismissed with a wave of his hand. The Black Wolves have legitimate business interests in this region. Your presence was an unexpected complication. Like Damascus was an unexpected complication. Crane stopped his circling, facing her directly. Damascus was a necessary action. You of all people should understand that. Assets that become liabilities must be eliminated. It's the nature of our business. Our business, Morgan repeated the words flat with contempt. I was never in your business, Nathan. I served my country. You served yourself. A quaint distinction. Crane signaled to his men, who retreated to positions along the wall, maintaining clear lines of fire, but giving the appearance of privacy. Where is the girl, Morgan? And more importantly, where is the pendant? Morgan's expression remained unchanged. Safe. Both of them. Nothing is safe from me. Not anymore. I have resources you can't imagine, connections at levels you never reached. The scared little CIA asset you knew in Damascus is gone. I've become something far more significant. You've become a criminal, Morgan corrected. A garden-variety thug with delusions of grandeur. 30 pieces of silver, Nathan. That's all it took to buy your loyalty. Anger flashed in Crane's eyes, a momentary crack in his controlled facade. 30 million in conflict diamonds. Enough to build an empire while you've been flipping burgers in nowhere, Montana. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I know about the pendant, Morgan. I know what Carter put on it. Names, dates, transaction records. Evidence that could destroy people far more powerful than either of us. Then you know why I can't give it to you. Can't or won't. Crane straightened, resuming his calculated demeanor. I'm offering you a choice, Morgan. A simple transaction. The pendant for the lives of your neighbors, the mayor, the doctor, the others I've collected. Plus amnesty for you and the girl. New identities, new resources, a fresh start far from here. Morgan met his gaze without flinching. You killed my team. You murdered Haley's parents right in front of her. You betrayed everything we stood for. There is no transaction to be made, Nathan. Not now, not ever. Crane sighed, a sound of theatrical disappointment. Always the idealist. Even after everything you've seen, everything you've done. I'd hoped age might have granted you wisdom. He turned away, moving back toward his elevated platform. Bring in the hostages. Perhaps visual aids will help Captain Reeves understand the stakes more clearly. As guards moved to comply with his order, Morgan spoke again, her voice carrying easily through the cavernous space. Before you do that, Nathan, you might want to check your watch. Crane paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. Despite himself, he glanced at his wrist in instinctive response to the suggestion. The timepiece showed 6:58 a.m. Significant time, he asked, turning back toward her. Morgan's lips curved in a smile that held no warmth. It means that in approximately 20 seconds, Operation Phantom Rising goes active, and everything you've built here begins to fall apart. Before Crane could respond, the lights went out. The sudden darkness was absolute, generators falling silent simultaneously with the main power. Emergency systems failed to activate. Communications devices emitted dying squeals as their frequencies were jammed. In the disorienting blackness, the sounds of confusion erupted. Shouted orders, stumbling movements, the clatter of equipment. 18 seconds of darkness, precisely counted. Then the backup generators engaged, casting the interior in the harsh glow of emergency lighting. But in those 18 seconds, everything had changed. Morgan Reeves was gone, the restraints that had bound her lying empty on the concrete floor. And Nathan Crane found himself facing the business end of his own sidearm, now held in the steady grip of Colonel Jack Reeves, who had materialized beside him like an avenging spirit. Hello, Crane, the colonel said, his weathered face impassive. Special Forces retired, though not as retired as you might think. Around the perimeter of the room, other transformations had occurred. Two of Crane's guards now stood with weapons trained on their former comrades. Another lay unconscious with Viper crouched over him, one of her knives visible in her hand. The main entrance was secured by figures in tactical gear who had not been there moments before, Pinewood's hidden veterans mobilized by the colonel's network. Impressive, Crane acknowledged, his composure unbroken despite the reverse tactical situation. The woman I knew as Shadow never disappointed, though I have to wonder, his eyes narrowed, calculating even in defeat. Where is she now? As if in answer, a new disturbance erupted from the direction of the secondary processing building where the hostages were being held. Gunfire, brief and disciplined, shouts of command, then silence. The colonel's radio crackled. Hostages secured, came Morgan's voice, cool and professional. Building clear, proceeding to phase 3. Copy that, Reeves replied, never taking his eyes off Crane. Primary target contained, awaiting your arrival. A ghost of a smile touched the older man's lips as he addressed his captive. You were so focused on the shadow you knew that you missed the shadows all around you. Pinewood isn't just any town's son, it's a sanctuary, built by veterans for veterans. The kind of place where a third of the population has seen combat and a quarter has operated behind enemy lines. Understanding dawned in Crane's eyes the realization that he had not invaded a sleepy Montana town, but had stumbled into a hornet's nest of experienced operators. That the civilian hostages he'd taken were anything but helpless. That he had been outmaneuvered from the moment his black wolves crossed the town line. The hostages, he said, his tactical mind already seeking leverage. My men won't surrender without a fight. Blood for blood. Your men are already neutralized, the colonel replied. Non-lethal takedowns where possible. We're professionals, not butchers. His eyes hardened. Unlike some. Crane's expression shifted, abandoning pretense as he recognized the inevitable. She won't kill me, he said with sudden certainty. Shadow always had her limits. Her principles. He nearly spat the last word. Maybe so, Reeves acknowledged, but I don't answer to Shadow. I answer to the memory of good men and women who died in Damascus because you sold them out. The colonel's finger tightened imperceptibly on the trigger. Give me one reason why I shouldn't balance that account right now. Before Crane could respond, the main doors opened, and Morgan entered, flanked by Doc and Echo. Behind them came the former hostages, Mayor Thompson, Dr. Richards, and others from town, now armed and alert, their civilian demeanor replaced by the unmistakable bearing of people who had seen combat. Former military hiding in plain sight as small-town citizens now revealed in their true capacity. You planted your own people as hostages, Crane said, realization dawning. The perfect Trojan horse. No bow, Morgan replied as she crossed to where the colonel held Crane at gunpoint. Pinewood is a sanctuary for veterans. The hostages you took were all former operators, each with decades of experience. These aren't civilians playing dress-up. They're the best soldiers this country has ever produced, retired to a quiet life until you threatened their home. Morgan's eyes cataloged the scene with professional assessment. Status, she asked. Compound secured, Reeves reported. All Black Wolves personnel contained or neutralized. 3 minor injuries on our side, none critical. No civilian casualties. Morgan nodded satisfied, then turned her attention to Crane. You always did underestimate the human element, Nathan. Thought everyone had a price, everyone could be bought or broken. Never understood the power of community, of loyalty freely given, not coerced. Crane's eyes narrowed. Spare me the lecture on virtue, Morgan. We both know what you've done in service to your precious country, the lines you've crossed, the lives you have taken. The difference is I remember every one of them, she replied quietly. Their weight is mine to carry. Can you say the same? A tense silence stretched between them, decades of divergent paths condensed into a single moment of confrontation. Then with deliberate control, Morgan reached for the colonel's hand, easing the weapon away from Crane's head. We're not executing prisoners, she said, her voice carrying the authority that had once commanded the most elite special operations unit in the military. That's not who we are, not who we ever were. He deserves it, Reeves argued, the weapon still firm in his grip. Probably, Morgan agreed. But we operate under the rule of law, Jack, even when others don't, especially then. After a moment's hesitation, the colonel relented, lowering the weapon but keeping it trained on Crane's center mass, a compromise between mercy and vigilance. The pendant, Crane said, his voice taut with barely controlled desperation. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Morgan. The people behind Damascus, they won't stop with me. They'll come for you, for the girl, for everyone in this backwater town. They'll burn it all to the ground to protect themselves. Let them try, Morgan replied, her confidence absolute. They'll find what you did, that some ghosts don't die easily. A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. Haley entered, accompanied by Jenkins, her expression a complex mixture of determination and tightly controlled fear. She moved directly to Morgan's front, and her steps never faltering despite the tension that filled the space. Crane's eyes fixed on her with predatory intensity. The Carter girl, all grown up. His gaze dropped to the pendant visible at her throat, and still carrying Daddy's insurance policy. Haley, Morgan said, her voice carrying a warning. You were supposed to remain at the extraction point with Jenkins. Change of plans, Haley replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Operation Sparrow, remember. Understanding dawned in Morgan's eyes, the separate contingencies she had noticed, but not questioned. She turned to Jenkins, who offered an unapologetic shrug. Her idea, the older man said, seems solid. Before Morgan could respond, Haley stepped forward, addressing Crane directly. "You killed my parents," she said, her voice clear in the tense silence. "I was 12 years old. You took everything from me." She reached for the pendant at her throat. "But my father was smarter than you. He knew men like you existed. Men who could be bought, who would betray their oaths, their country, their brothers in arms." She removed the chain holding the pendant before her like a talisman. "This isn't just data storage. It's a quantum transmitter, activated by my voice, my biometric signature. For the past hour, it's been transmitting everything it contains to secure servers at Langley, at the Pentagon, at every major intelligence agency in the country." Her eyes never left Crane's face. "My father's insurance policy is now the world's insurance policy. Against you. Against everyone involved in Damascus." Crane's composure cracked genuine fear, replacing calculation in his expression. "You're bluffing. That technology didn't exist in 2015. "My father helped develop it," Haley countered. "He was always ahead of the curve, always 3 steps ahead of people like you." As if to confirm her words, Echo's communications equipment emitted a series of alerts. He checked the display, his eyebrows rising. "Multiple federal agencies mobilizing," he reported. "FBI, Homeland Security, U.S. Marshals, all converging on our location." He looked up, genuine surprise in his expression. "This is high-level activation, director authorized." Morgan turned to Haley, newfound respect, mingling with maternal concern. "So this is Operation Sparrow. You contacted Langley." "Not exactly," Haley replied. "The pendant did. Automatic protocol once activated with the full passphrase. Dead man's switch, essentially. If anything happened to me, everything would be released anyway." She looked back at Crane. "You never had a chance of containing this, Mr. Crane. Not from the moment you set foot in Pinewood." The distant sound of helicopter rotors confirmed Echo's report. Federal response teams inbound with remarkable speed, the kind of reaction that only came with highest-level authorization. Crane's shoulders slumped, the fight visibly leaving him as he recognized complete defeat. Not just the tactical loss of the day's battle, but the strategic collapse of everything he had built since Damascus. The evidence that could destroy him and his powerful sponsors was beyond his reach, now spreading through secure channel to those who would act upon it. "You Carters," he muttered, a mixture of respect and bitterness in his voice. "Always thinking 5 moves ahead." "Secure him properly," Morgan ordered, and Doc moved forward with restraints more substantial than those that had failed to hold Morgan earlier. "Full tactical protocols. He's still dangerous." As Doc secured the prisoner, Morgan turned to Haley, drawing her slightly away from the others. "Operation Sparrow," she said, equal parts question and statement. "We needed insurance," Haley explained, "in case something went wrong with the main plan. Jenkins helped me modify the pendant's transmission protocols, and Colonel Reeves made sure the right people at Langley would receive the data." She hesitated. "I should have told you, but—" "You did exactly right," Morgan interrupted, surprising herself with the realization that she meant it. "Operational security, need-to-know basis." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Just like I taught you." Haley's relief was visible. "So you're not mad?" "Oh, I'm furious," Morgan clarified, though her expression belied the words. "But also proud." She studied her daughter's face, the determined set of her jaw, the clear-eyed courage that reminded her so much of both Adam and Emily Carter. "You're your parents' daughter. All of them." Before Haley could respond, the sound of helicopter rotors grew louder, and Echo reported, "Federal vehicles approaching the perimeter. Multiple teams, heavy presence." Morgan nodded, unsurprised. "Jenkins, Colonel, secure the area for handover. Doc Viper, final check on our wounded and the contained hostiles. Echo, prepare a full briefing package for the federal response team. They'll want details." She turned back to Haley. "And you stay with me, from now on." As the team moved to execute her orders with practiced efficiency, Morgan allowed herself a moment to absorb what they had accomplished. The threat neutralized, the hostages safe, the evidence secured, and most importantly, Haley protected the promise she had made to Adam Carter in Damascus, finally fully kept. The door they had all believed closed on that bloody night 5 years ago was opening again. But this time, justice would walk through it. 3 weeks later, Ruby's Diner reopened to the citizens of Pinewood. The bullet holes had been patched, the broken windows replaced, the blood scrubbed from the linoleum floors. To casual observers, it looked much the same as it always had, a little weathered, comfortably worn, the neon sign still flickering at dusk, with the same ruby glow that had welcomed travelers for nearly 3 decades. But like its owner, the diner had changed in ways only the observant might notice. The new windows were bulletproof, disguised as ordinary glass. The security cameras were military-grade, their feeds monitored not just locally, but by a rotating watch team of former operators. The innocuous fire extinguisher by the kitchen door contained a chemical compound developed for crowd control in Kandahar, a fortress masquerading as a roadside eatery. Much like Morgan Reeves had been a lethal operative masquerading as a small-town diner owner and single mother. On this particular morning, Morgan stood behind the counter pouring coffee with the same economical grace she'd always shown. Her hair was pulled back in its usual practical ponytail, her movements still precise, her eyes still automatically cataloging everyone who entered her establishment. Some habits couldn't be broken. Didn't need to be, perhaps. The bell above the door chimed, and Morgan looked up to see Colonel Reeves enter, removing his cap as he always did. But the nod he gave her carried new weight, the acknowledgement between comrades, who had faced fire together, who had seen beneath each other's carefully maintained facades. Their relationship had deepened since the confrontation at the lumber mill. What had once been a cautious alliance built on shared military experience had transformed into something more personal. The colonel had been a friend and mentor to Morgan during her early days in Special Forces, and now 20 years later, they had rediscovered that connection strengthened by the trials they had faced together. "Morning shadow," he said quietly, settling onto his usual stool at the counter. Morgan's lips curved in a small smile as she poured his coffee, black sliding it across with practiced precision. "It's still Morgan in here, Jack." Reeves accepted the coffee with a nod. Old habits. He sipped the hot liquid, his expression turning thoughtful. "Heard from Echo this morning. The federal investigation is expanding. 3 senior officials at the Pentagon have been taken into custody. A deputy director at Langley is cooperating with prosecutors." Morgan nodded, absorbing this information with outward calm, though satisfaction coursed through her. The evidence from Haley's pendant was doing exactly what Adam Carter had intended, exposing the corruption that had led to Damascus holding accountable those who had ordered the death of her team. "And Crane?" she asked. "Maximum security facility in Colorado," Reeves replied. "Military tribunal pending. He's talking, apparently, trying to reduce his sentence by implicating others." A grim smile touched the older man's lips. "Too late for that. The pendant data has already given prosecutors everything they need." A comfortable silence settled between them, the ease of 2 people who no longer needed to maintain pretenses with each other. Since the confrontation at the lumber mill, Pinewood had changed in subtle but fundamental ways. The carefully maintained boundaries between the former operators who had settled there and the civilians they lived alongside had blurred, replaced by a new kind of understanding. The town knew now. Not everything the classified details of phantom operations remained secret. The full extent of Morgan's operational history still redacted from public knowledge. But they knew enough. That many of their neighbors had once served in elite units. That Morgan Reeves had been something more than a diner owner before arriving in their community. That Pinewood itself had been chosen as a sanctuary for those seeking second chances after lives of service and sacrifice. "Your guest arrived last night," Reeves mentioned, changing the subject. "Jenkins got her settled at the Bluebird Motel. Said she'd be by this morning." Morgan's expression softened slightly. "Thank you for arranging that. It means a lot to Haley." "Least I could do." Reeves studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. "How's she handling everything? The revelations, the attention, the change in status." "Better than I would have at her age," Morgan admitted. "She's strong, resilient, gets that from both sides of her family." Before Reeves could respond, the bell above the door chimed again. An elegant woman in her mid-60s entered, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, her bearing unmistakably military despite her civilian clothing. Her eyes swept the diner, pausing briefly on Reeves before settling on Morgan, with an intensity that spoke of careful assessment of recognition beyond the physical. "Mrs. Carter," Morgan said, setting aside the coffee pot and moving around the counter to greet her properly. "Welcome to Ruby's." Catherine Carter extended her hand, a gesture simultaneously formal and deeply meaningful. "Captain Reeves," she replied. Or do you prefer Morgan now? Morgan, please, she replied, accepting the handshake with the respect it deserved. I'm glad you could come. The invitation had been sent 3 weeks earlier after careful consideration and extensive discussion with both Haley and the Phantom team. Catherine Carter had been kept in the dark about Damascus for 5 years, told only that her son and daughter-in-law had died in a car accident, that her granddaughter had been adopted by a family friend and relocated for her own protection. A necessary lie that had caused pain Morgan regretted but couldn't have avoided at the time. Sheriff Dawson has been telling me about Pinewood, Catherine said, her voice carrying the cultured tones of old Virginia aristocracy tempered by 30 years as a military spouse. It sounds like you found a good home here. The best, Morgan confirmed, gesturing toward a booth, not her usual tactical position, but one that offered privacy for the conversation to come. Haley will be out in a moment. She's been looking forward to meeting you. As if summoned by her name, Haley emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron in that unconscious mimicry of Morgan that had become so familiar. She paused momentarily upon seeing Catherine, recognition flickering across her features, not memory precisely, but something deeper, a connection that transcended the years of separation. Grandma Katie, she said, the childhood nickname emerging from some recess of memory previously inaccessible. Catherine Carter's composed facade cracked slightly, emotion washing across her features as she stood to greet her granddaughter. Haley, my God, you look so much like your father. The embrace that followed carried 5 years of absence of questions unanswered, of family connections severed by violence and maintained deceptions. Morgan stepped back, allowing them this moment of reunion without intrusion. Colonel Reeves caught her eye from his position at the counter, offering a subtle nod of approval. This connection, this healing of one more wound left by Damascus, had been his suggestion initially. Family matters, he had said simply, even the complicated parts, especially those. As Haley led her grandmother to the booth, Morgan signaled to Viper, who had been inconspicuously monitoring the situation from a corner table, that all was well. The protective network that had formed around them in the months since the Black Wolves' attack remained vigilant, but increasingly it functioned as support rather than security, a community rather than a tactical team. Morgan brought coffee to the table, giving Haley and Catherine space to begin the conversation that would inevitably lead to difficult truths, to explanations too long delayed, to the reality of Damascus and everything that had followed. Not all at once, some revelations needed time, context, careful handling, but the process had begun. Another piece of the healing that had characterized the weeks since Crane's capture. As she moved back behind the counter, Morgan's gaze drifted to the window, to the Montana landscape, beyond the rugged mountains, the endless sky, the community that had become home in ways she had never anticipated when selecting it as a strategic hideout 5 years earlier. Her hand moved unconsciously to her wrist, to the Phantom 6 tattoo she no longer concealed beneath gloves or long sleeves. The compass rose with its distinctive red star at the center, once a symbol of operational identity, then a painful reminder of loss now integrated into the person she had become. Neither Shadow nor Morgan Foster, exclusively, but something more complete than either, had been alone. Ehud, Harlow called, Colonel Reeves mentioned as she refilled his coffee. CIA wants to formalize your consulting arrangement. Full reinstatement if you want it. Morgan considered this, weighing the pull of her former life against the peace she had found in Pinewood. What did you tell him? That you'd consider it, Reeves replied. On your terms, not theirs. That Pinewood comes first. She nodded, satisfied with his understanding of her priorities. And the Pentagon must be knocking on your door too. A smile touched the colonel's weathered face. Offered me a star. Can you imagine General Reeves at my age? He shook his head. Told them I'm already where I need to be. Running a gas station, keeping an eye on things, making sure people like us have somewhere to go when the missions end. Building something instead of tearing it down, Morgan observed. Exactly. Reeves glanced toward the booth where Haley and Catherine were deep in conversation, the older woman showing photographs, the younger listening with rapt attention. That's the real work in the end, the stuff that lasts. Morgan refilled his cup, a simple gesture that carried the weight of shared understanding. They had been warriors once, she and Reeves and all the others who had found their way to Pinewood, had moved through shadows, had done what was necessary when necessity demanded terrible things, had carried burdens few could comprehend and fewer still could bear. But they had survived. had found their way back to light, to community, to purpose beyond violence, had built lives that honored the sacrifices made, the comrades lost the oaths taken. "I've been thinking about Harlow's offer," Morgan said after a moment, her decision crystallizing as she spoke. "I'll consult but remotely, no field operations, and only on cases related to Damascus or similar threats." She met the colonel's gaze. "I'm not leaving Pinewood. This is home now." Reeves nodded approval, evident in his expression. "Best of both worlds, using your skills without sacrificing what you've built here." "What we've all built," Morgan corrected. "This sanctuary you created, it's saved us, Jack. Not just me and Haley, but all of us who found our way here. I won't abandon that." The colonel's eyes softened with an emotion rarely displayed in his military career. "Never thought I'd see Shadow put down roots. But it suits you, Morgan. Better than the shadows ever did." The bell above the door chimed again as a new customer entered, just another ordinary moment in a day that promised many more like it. Morgan moved to greet them, the diner owner once more the operative at rest, but never truly gone. The tattoo on her wrist caught the morning light as she reached for a fresh mug, the symbol the Army still feared, not for what it had represented in the shadows of covert operations, but for what it had become in the light of Pinewood. A mark not of death, but of rebirth. A compass guiding her not to war, but to peace. A reminder not of what she had lost, but of what she had found. The perfect balance between Shadow and Morgan, between past and present, between duty and family. A life not divided by conflicting identities, but united by shared purpose, protection, service, home. 5 years after Damascus, Morgan Reeves had finally completed her mission. Not just the one assigned by her government age, but the one she had assigned herself to build something lasting from the ashes of destruction. To keep her promise to Adam Carter, not just by keeping Haley alive, but by giving her a life worth living. And in doing so, she had found one for herself as well. The end.